From the beautiful California coast to the urban jungle of New York City, baseball stadiums have long been the beating heart of America's pastime. Over the years, Major League Baseball has seen many iconic ballparks come and go. While these historic MLB stadiums are now confined to the history books, they left behind rich legacies and marked key chapters to baseball's evolution.
Biggest cheers from 50,000 fans go to the immortal star himself, Babe Ruth.
The famous house that Ruth built is arguably one of the most iconic ballparks to ever house the game of baseball. The original Yankee Stadium opened its gates on April 18, 1923. It was home of the New York Yankees until 2008 as well. Located at 161st Street and River Avenue in the Bronx, the stadium was the bold vision of Yankees owners Colonel Jacob Ruppert and Colonel T.L. Huston. Ruppert and Huston purchased land less than a mile from the Polo Grounds for $675,000, which is roughly $12.6 million today. The goal was simple: give the Yankees a home of their own. Ohio-based engineering firm Osborne Engineering created the initial plans that called for a triple-deck stadium with grandstands wrapping around the entire field. The plans were modestly scaled back slightly to soften the structure's imposing presence, but the final result was still groundbreaking for the time. With 3 tiers of seating and capacity of 58,000, it became the first ballpark to officially be called a stadium, and it was a fitting name that matched its monumental scale.
We have a good hitting lineup, and we should, by rights, score enough runs to win the majority of our ball games. It leaves it up to the pitching staff from there, and if they come through, I think we will win this time.
Construction on the original Yankee Stadium began on May 5, 1922, and incredibly, construction wrapped up in just 284 working days. Built from steel and concrete, the stadium featured a triple-deck grandstand stretching from home plate down both baselines. Historians and diehard Yankee fans remember the iconic 15-foot copper facade that crowned the third deck, instantly recognizable to fans across generations. The original field dimensions were dramatic: 295 feet down the right field line, a cavernous 490 to center, nicknamed Death Valley, and 281 feet down to left. On opening day, April 18, 1923, the Yankees defeated the Boston Red Sox 4-1. Famous New York Yankee Babe Ruth launched a 3-run homer into the right field stands. Later that same year, the Yankees would capture their first World Series title, setting the tone for decades of dominance. During the mid-1970s, the stadium underwent a major transformation. From 1974 to 75, it was largely demolished and rebuilt. This meant the Yankees temporarily shared Shea Stadium with the Mets. Though the renovated Yankee Stadium reopened on April 15, 1976, and retained some of the original exterior walls and superstructure, the majesty that was the original ballpark was gone. The Yankees played their final game in the stadium on September 21, 2008. Demolition followed a year later in 2009. The new Yankee Stadium rose just across the street, but with a more modern design. Yet, for many fans, the new stadium would never match the grandeur of the house that Ruth and so many others helped build.
Excuse me, sir. Why do you like the Mets? But the Mets are the team that's supposed to be understood, you know? They are young, they are trying to make themselves understood to the fact that they lose and they come behind, and that's it.
Shea Stadium wasn't just a ballpark. It was the place that gave baseball back to New Yorkers. While officially named William A. Shea Municipal Stadium, Shea Stadium, as the fans called it, served as the home for the famous New York Mets from 1964 to 2008. For a time also, from 1964 to 83, it also hosted the New York Jets. Located in historic Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, the stadium honored William Shea, the attorney who championed bringing National League Baseball back to New York after the Dodgers and Giants left the cold Northeast for sunny California in 1957. Construction began on October 28, 1961, but unfortunately for the Mets, the timing was less than ideal. They were forced to play for 2 seasons at the aging Polo Grounds while Shea was being built. The stadium officially opened on April 17, 1964, with more than 50,000 fans in attendance. But of course, after all the anticipation for a new stadium, bad luck struck again with the Mets losing 4-3 to the Pittsburgh Pirates. The debut was memorable not just for the game, but for the traffic jam it caused. Parking around the new ballpark was nothing short of a nightmare. Shea was a 5-tiered facility and had a seating capacity of 55,601. It broke new ground in stadium design by featuring an extensive elevator system and motorized stands that allowed it to convert between football and baseball with ease. Instead of traditional light towers, the stadium lighting was built into the roof, which was a unique touch for its time. There were some ambitious plans for Shea after 1.7 million fans packed the stadium in its first season. These plans included adding 15,000 seats and installing a dome. However, structural studies revealed the pilings couldn't support a dome, and the idea was quickly shelved. Shea also drew criticism for its concrete-heavy design, but worse yet, its proximity to LaGuardia Airport meant that overhead planes often drowned out action on the field. Despite the setback, Shea Stadium became the stage for unforgettable moments. It played host to unforgettable events like the 1964 All-Star Game, the Mets' legendary 1969 Miracle Mets, their '86 World Series, Beatles concerts, and even a visit from the Pope. The Mets played their final game at Shea Stadium on September 28, 2008, before moving to Citi Field the following year. Demolition began not long after, and by February 2009, the legendary Shea was gone. The former site now serves as a parking lot for the Mets fans' new home, Citi Field. And don't get me wrong, I love Citi Field, I really do, but there's just nothing like Shea, I don't know. And while it might sound odd to talk about Canada when it comes to America's favorite pastime, you certainly cannot talk about stadiums of the past without talking about the Canucks. Jarry Park Stadium in Montreal was never meant to be a major league ballpark, but for 8 seasons from 1969 to 76, it was home to history. Jarry Park served as a temporary home of the Montreal Expos, Major League Baseball's first Canadian franchise. What began as a modest 3,000-seat amateur field inside Montreal's Jarry Park quickly transformed to meet the demands of the big leagues. After being awarded an expansion team in 1968, plans were drawn up for a brand new 25,000-seat stadium, which is roughly the size of today's Tropicana Field. But when the city declined to fund it, Mayor Jean Japro stepped in with a solution: expand Jarry Park through temporary construction.
After several hours of exchanging views, we managed to find a formula for agreement that seems feasible. This plan involves using the Jarry Park Stadium, which will be adapted by the city to meet the standards of the National Baseball League.
The result was a rapid build-out that added 25,000 seats, bringing the park's capacity to just over 28,000, making it the smallest stadium in the majors at the time. Despite its limitations, Jarry Park made a strong first impression. In its debut season, the Expos drew 1.2 million fans, ranking among the top 10 in attendance, even easily outpacing the Yankees, Orioles, Giants, and Phillies. And on opening day in April of 1969, more than 29,000 fans filled the stand. Unfortunately, rough Canadian winters caused construction delays thanks to lingering winter snow. This meant workers had to improvise by placing 6,000 folding chairs where permanent seats hadn't yet been installed. Jarry Park Stadium was a great example of sometimes simple just works fine. The stadium itself consisted of one tier of seating stretched from foul pole to foul pole, with bleachers in left field and a scoreboard perched behind a wire fence in right. The added convenience of a metro station and the Metropolitan Expressway made it easy for fans to get there too. Despite the crowds and its 8-season run as the Expos' home, Jarry Park was only meant to be temporary until the Olympic Stadium was ready for the 1976 Olympics. Their final game was played on September 26, 1976. Today, the site lives as a venue for concerts, exhibitions, and professional tennis, carrying forward a legacy that began with folding chairs and a dream. Shibe Park, later renamed Connie Mack Stadium, was an engineering marvel at the beginning of the 20th century. A trailblazer in ballpark design, it became a cornerstone of Philadelphia baseball history. It was the first major league stadium built entirely of steel and concrete. When it opened on April 12, 1909, it served as the home to both the Phillies from 1938 to 70 and the Philadelphia Athletics until 1954. The stadium was located at 21st Street and Lehigh Avenue in North Philadelphia. Philadelphia Athletics owner Ben Shibe funded the project at a cost of just over $300,000, which is about $11.5 million in today's dollars. Construction took just 1 year and resulted in a 23,000-seat ballpark with sweeping dimensions: 378 feet to left, 515 to center, and 340 to right. A double-deck grandstand wrapped around the infield, while open pavilion seating stretching to both foul poles, and at first, there were no seats in the outfield. Opening day for Shibe Park was a glorious disaster.
Then why are you here?
It's cheaper to get a somewhere near than in Florida.
I see, thank you.
Thank you.
The park drew a record-setting crowd of 30,162 fans, more than the stadium could even hold. Tickets for opening day sold out quickly, so that left an estimated 15,000 fans waiting outside. When some fans tried to force their way in, police were forced to intervene to prevent provincial injuries. About 7,000 fans ended up standing behind the ropes in the outfield, too. Seeing a quick money-making opportunity, some enterprising residents on nearby 20th Street offered rooftop seating and window views to those with deeper pockets. But those rooftop entrepreneurs would soon lose their cash crop. The stadium's exterior was just as iconic. A dome tower at the corner of 21st and Lehigh housed offices, including a cupola where manager and owner Cornelius McGillicuddy, or Connie Mack, himself kept watch. When it was finished, Shibe Park was hailed as a palace for fans, the most beautiful and capacious baseball structure in the world. Not everyone in Philadelphia was crazy about the park's features, especially people living in high-rise buildings near the park. In the winter of 1934-35, the Athletics built the infamous Spite Fence. The fence was a 22-foot high corrugated metal extension atop the right field wall. This raised the fence to a staggering 50 feet, and the intention was to block rooftop viewers on that 20th Street who had been charging admission during the Great Depression. The rippled surface caused unpredictable bounces, frustrating fields and fans alike. It obviously was enough for the Phillies because in the middle of the Phillies' 1938 season, the team left the deteriorating Baker Bowl and moved into Shibe Park. On May 16, 1939, the stadium even hosted the first night game in American League history. That night, the Athletics fell to the Cleveland Indians 8-3. But in 1953, the ballpark was renamed Connie Mack Stadium in honor of the legendary Athletics manager. The Athletics played their final game in Connie Mack Stadium on September 19, 1954, and the team eventually relocated to Kansas City. Phillies remained until October 1, 1970, when they closed the stadium's chapter with a 2-1 win over the Montreal Expos. In 1976, the famed Connie Mack Stadium was demolished, but its legacy still echoes through the streets of North Philadelphia.
Connie Mack Stadium, named for a man whose name will never be forgotten in Philadelphia or the Baseball Hall of Fame.
For nearly 4 decades, Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland stood as good a soldier like the veterans it was built to honor. Located at 900 East 33rd Street, it served as the home for both the Baltimore Orioles from 1954 to 91 and the Baltimore Colts from 1953 to 83. It was built on the same site as the old Municipal Stadium, named in honor of soldiers who gave their lives in World Wars I and II. A tribute was carved into the concrete wall at the home plate entrance. The original Municipal Stadium was constructed in 1922 as a football venue. It served as home to the minor league Orioles in 1944 after their previous ballpark, aptly named Oriole Park, was destroyed by fire in July of 1944. The championship crowds dwarfed those of the 1944 World Series, sending a clear message to major league owners. Baltimore was ready for the big league. Voters approved a $2.5 million plan to rebuild the stadium in 1947, and construction began in 1949 and finished in 1950. The Orioles took the field for the first game on April 20th at the newly named Memorial Stadium. While initially designed with a single-tier grandstand and seating for 31,000, the stadium was later expanded with an upper deck to accommodate 47,700 fans. It was the city's hope that the additional seating would attract a Major League Baseball franchise, and they were right. The gamble paid off in 1954 when the St. Louis Browns relocated to Baltimore and became the Orioles. The first game at Memorial Stadium was played on April 15, 1954. The ballpark featured 2 main seating decks arranged in a horseshoe shape from behind home plate down both baselines, with the lower deck stretching into the outfield. Though it may seem trivial to some, one of Memorial Stadium's standout features was its scoreboard. The historic Gunther Brewing Company sponsored the scoreboard in right center field and was the largest electrical scoreboard in the world when it was installed in 1954. Additionally, a hedge once served as the center field fence before being replaced by wire. The stadium's reddish-brown brick exterior gave it a distinctive, grounded presence. Memorial Stadium became a crucible for championships. The Orioles won World Series titles in 1966, 1970, 83, along with American League pennants in 1969, 71, and 79.
0-2 the count on Maddox. A liner, and the Orioles are the world champions.
Besides baseball, the stadium also hosted NFL games and later welcomed the Canadian Football League's Baltimore Stallions in the mid-1990s. But all good things came to an end when the Orioles played their final game at Memorial Stadium on October 6, 1991. They sadly fell to Detroit Tigers 7-1. A heartfelt post-game ceremony featured 78 former Orioles players, culminating in the grounds crew removing home plate and delivering it by limousine to the New Camden Yards. Memorial Stadium was ultimately demolished in 2002, but its legacy of the Orioles, their World Series wins, and the countless memories from fans remain etched in Baltimore's sporting soul. Moving over to the Midwest, ask any baseball fan from Cleveland about Cleveland Stadium, and they'll likely correct you. The Mistake by the Lake. Commonly referred to as Municipal Stadium, Cleveland Stadium was a bold experiment in multi-purpose design. Situated near the banks of Lake Erie, it played home to both the Cleveland Indians from 1932 to 93 and the Cleveland Browns from 1946 to 95. What made Cleveland Stadium unique for its time was one of the first stadiums designed to host both baseball and football games, a feat not easy to just pull off. Ideas for the new stadium in Cleveland date back to 1903. The earliest concepts of the ballpark began with only considering 25,000-seat venue, which was fairly modest for that time. But by the late 1920s, Osborne Engineering, engineers for the original Yankee Stadium, drew up plans for something far larger. They envisioned a venue capable of hosting a wide range of events. In 1928, the city of Cleveland issued a $2.5 million bond to fund construction, making Cleveland Stadium the first in the country built with public money. Rather than use valuable real estate, the developers chose a landfill filled with old cars and tires right along the lakefront. Shovels hit the ground by June 24, 1930, and July 1, 1931, just in time for Independence Day, the steel and concrete structure was complete. Originally dubbed Lakefront Stadium, it opened without a primary tenant. At the time, the Indians were still playing at League Park and wanted to negotiate a favorable lease term before actually making the move. More than a year later, the Cleveland Indians would play their first game at the new stadium, which opened on July 31, 1932 for their first game. The stadium had a gargantuan amount of seats, a total staggering capacity of 78,189. This made it the largest stadium in the MLB for most of its existence. Even now, no baseball stadiums rivaled the seating capacity of the original Cleveland Stadium. Its layout featured a covered double-deck grandstand in a horseshoe shape behind home plate, with uncovered bleachers stretching across the outfield. The seating breakdown included 37,896 seats in the lower level, 29,380 in the upper deck, and 10,913 in the bleachers. Its sheer size made it a pitcher's park, with original dimensions of 322 feet down the lines and a daunting 463 feet to center. But having a stadium of this magnitude came with a drawback. When only 20,000 fans showed up, the stadium felt cavernous and empty. From 1934 to 46, the Indians split their schedule, playing weekends and holidays at Cleveland Stadium, playing weekdays at League Park. However, after 1946, they made the stadium their full-time home, and the stadium was renamed from Lakeside to Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Renovations took place between 1967 and 74. These renovations including modernized updates such as plastic seating and a new scoreboard. But when the Indians' performance started to take a dive in the 80s and 90s, fans began voicing their frustrations by staying home. In 1985, new owners Richard and David Jacobs began pushing for a new ballpark. The Indians would play their final game in Cleveland Municipal Stadium on October 3rd of 1993, with the Browns remaining until 1995. Demolition began in November 1996, and a new stadium for the Browns was built on the same site. It marked the end of an era for a venue that once dreamed big and was big, even if the teams didn't always deliver.
We're at the first game the Indians played here, the last game, and what kind of memories are you going to take this afternoon?
Well, what Bob Hope says, thanks for the many, many memories.
Another stadium under the moniker Municipal Stadium, Kansas City. From 1955 to 1972, Kansas City Municipal Stadium served up more than baseball. It was a crossroads of baseball, football, and community spirit. Originally built in the early 1920s as Mulbach Field, it served as the home to the minor league Kansas City Blues and the Negro League's Kansas City Monarch. Over the decades, it evolved into a multi-purpose facility that hosted the Kansas City Athletics from 1955 to 67, and later the Kansas City Royals from 1969 to 72. The original stadium was constructed in 1923 by George Mulbach for $400,000, roughly $7.5 million in today's money. It featured a single-tier grandstand with seating for 17,000. It was renamed Ruppert Stadium in 1937 after New York Yankees owner Colonel Jacob Ruppert purchased the Blues, and then later it became Blues Stadium following Ruppert's death. After Arnold Johnson acquired the Philadelphia Athletics in 1954 and moved them to Kansas City, leaders felt the stadium needed a major upgrade. In 1955, the city passed a public bond to fund the expansion, adding a double-decked grandstand from home plate to the right field foul pole and down the third base line. This took the seating capacity from a minimal 17,000 seats to a respectable capacity of 30,611. The Athletics, or as fans would later call them, simply the A's, debuted at Municipal Stadium on April 12, 1955, drawing over 30,000 fans and filling in almost every seat in the park. The ballpark had its share of quirky charm. For instance, it was home to a petting zoo and a mechanical rabbit named Harvey. The scoreboard was also salvaged from Braves Field in Boston, positioned beyond center field. In the early 1960s, AFL team owner Lamar Hunt was persuaded by then Mayor H. Bartle to relocate the Dallas Texans to Kansas City. Once again, Municipal Stadium was expanded, this time to seat 49,000 for football fans. The Texans would then become the Kansas City Chiefs and played their first game there on October 6, 1963. Municipal Stadium hosted the MLB All-Star Game in 1960 and the longest NFL game in history on Christmas Day in 1971, when the Chiefs defeated the Miami Dolphins in a playoff thriller. After the AFL-NFL merger on June 8, 1966, the stadium's limitations became clear. New regulations required venues to have a minimum capacity of 50,000. Municipal Stadium's football capacity capped at 35,000 with no room for full expansion. In 1967, more public bonds were issued to build the Truman Sports Complex, this time with separate stadiums for football and baseball. After the A's moved to Oakland in 1967, Kansas City was awarded an expansion team, the Royals, who began playing in 1969. Despite a disappointing 69-93 record, the team drew nearly 1 million fans in their inaugural season. They played their final game at Municipal Stadium on October 4, 1972, defeating the Texas Rangers 4-0 in what was also the last Major League game managed by Hall of Famer Ted Williams. The Chiefs moved to Arrowhead Stadium that same year, and the glory that was Municipal Stadium came to an end with its demolition in 1976.
If one word could be used to describe the Braves' first season in Wisconsin, that word would be success.
Milwaukee County Stadium marked a turning point in baseball history. Completed in 1953 at a cost of $5.9 million, it was the first publicly financed Major League stadium in the United States. It was built on the site of the old Story Quarry on Milwaukee's west side and designed, like many stadiums during that time, to attract a big league team and to serve as a venue for the beloved Green Bay Packers. The minor league Milwaukee Brewers were originally set to begin play in Milwaukee County Stadium starting in 1953, but just 3 weeks before opening day, the Boston Braves announced their relocation to Milwaukee. In a twist of baseball politics, the St. Louis Browns also applied to relocate to Milwaukee, but the Braves, holding territorial rights as the parent club of the minor league Brewers, put a stop to their plan. The Brewers ultimately moved to Toledo that same year, becoming the Mud Hens. The Braves took the field at County Stadium on April 14, 1953, securing their first win at home by defeating the St. Louis Cardinals 3-2 on a walk-off home run by Bill Bruton in the 10th inning. The Braves set a National League record that season after drawing 1.8 million fans. Milwaukee County offered the team a generous lease, a minimal $1,000 per year for the first 2 seasons, followed by a 5% of ticket and concession revenue for the next 3. County Stadium was practically a perfect size for baseball too, with a seating capacity of 36,011 and field dimensions of 362 feet down the lines and 402 to center. It would become a major success for Milwaukee. The Braves even reached back-to-back World Series in 1957 and 58, securing the championship in 1957. It was so well respected that the stadium even graced the cover of the inaugural issue of Sports Illustrated on August 16, 1954, featuring Braves slugger Eddie Matthews in full swing. The magic would slowly start to wear off over time as the Braves' performance dipped in the early 1960s though, and with the poor performance of the team, attendance quickly took a dive. Despite an impressive 13 consecutive winning seasons, team ownership sought a larger television market and announced plans to move to Atlanta. A legal battle ensued, and Milwaukee successfully had the courts enforce the team's lease through 1965. The optics, however, were not the greatest as fans just weren't eager to watch a lame duck team. Just 5 years later, Major League Baseball returned to Milwaukee in 1970 with the expansion Brewers, who played their first game at County Stadium on April 7th against the California Angels. In 1973, the stadium gained its now familiar team icon, Bernie the Brewer. Bernie famously slid down a beer barrel chalet beyond the center field bleachers after each home run. The stadium was expanded in the 1970s to seat over 52,000, with the upper deck stretching over the lower grandstand to foul poles. During the 90s, construction would begin on Miller Park in 1996. County Stadium was set to close after the 1999 season. However, a construction crane unexpectedly collapsed on July 14, 1999, causing a tragic accident that claimed 3 lives and injured 5 others. The tragedy delayed the new ballpark's completion by a full year. The Brewers would play their final game at County Stadium on September 28, 2000, defeating the Cincinnati Reds. The stadium was demolished in February 2001, and today, the site is home to Little League Park Halfair Field. Three Rivers Stadium stood at the confluence of Pittsburgh sports legacy. Built to replace the aging Forbes Field originally built in 1909, it opened in July 16, 1970, and served as the home for both the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Pittsburgh Steelers for the next 3 decades. The $55 million facility was part of a broader plan to transform the riverfront near the banks of the Allegheny and Monongahela Rivers. While it was designed for efficiency, it was also a spectacle to behold. Construction began in April 1968 and stretched a grueling 29 months, frequently falling behind schedule. The stadium's debut came with a Pirates game against the Cincinnati Reds. Despite the Pirates falling 3-2 to the Reds, the team drew the largest baseball crowd in Pittsburgh history at the time. Like many other stadiums of its era, Three Rivers was a cookie-cutter multi-purpose venue. It seated 47,942 for baseball, and thanks to the recent AFL-NFL merger, 59,000 for football. It featured 5 tiers of red and yellow seats enclosing to the field. To convert between sports, 2 banks of the 4,000 ground level seats along the baselines could be repositioned to form 8,000 seats at midfield for football. The original scoreboard loomed over center field until 1983, but was later replaced by a $5 million video board tucked beneath the stadium rim. That same year, the AstroTurf surface was replaced. Just before the 1994 All-Star Game, the new blue seats were installed in the lower deck, refreshing the stadium's look. For fans who wanted a meal while they watched their home teams, there was the famed Allegheny Club, a restaurant with panoramic views of the field. It offered seating for 300 in the viewing area and 400 in the main dining room. When fans arrived outside the stadium, they were greeted by statues of sports legends Roberto Clemente and Honus Wagner. True baseball fans know Three Rivers hosted some of the most iconic moments in sports history that fans and players still talk about to this day. For instance, it became the first venue to host a World Series game played at night in 1971. But one of the most legendary moments in NFL history was made a year later, when it became the stage of the Immaculate Reception. The Pirates made playoff appearances in 5 of their first 6 seasons at the stadium, winning the 1971 World Series under manager Danny Murtaugh. But by the 1990s, the Pirates were tired of sharing the now 20-year-old stadium and pushed for a baseball-only stadium. To drive home their demand, the team threatened to leave Pittsburgh without one, and their final game at Three Rivers came on October 1st, 2000. A few months later, the stadium was imploded on February 11, 2001. What was once a glorious landmark in sports history is now little more than just parking lots and stage AE, with entrance markers still standing near Acrisure Stadium. In 2012, on the 40th anniversary of Roberto Clemente's 3,000 hits, members of the Society for American Baseball Research returned to the site. They marked and painted the locations of home plate and first base, which was a quiet tribute to a place where legends once played.
Baltimore hitters' hands, and then I had Blyleven with the curve, and when I put him in, I said, it's all over, baby.
Few stadiums carry a name as iconic or as storied as Candlestick Park. Perched on the western windswept shore of San Francisco Bay at Candlestick Point, Candlestick Park served as the home of the San Francisco Giants from 1960 to 1999, and later hosted the 49ers until 2013. Named after the long-billed curlews or candlestick birds, they once called the area home. The stadium earned a reputation as one of baseball's most challenging venues thanks to its notorious wind conditions. When the New York Giants relocated to San Francisco in 1958, the team temporarily played at Seals Stadium, a minor league field, while the city worked to fulfill its promise of a new ballpark. The city considered 2 possible locations, downtown San Francisco and Candlestick Point. Ultimately, the latter was chosen for its affordability and proximity to the city-owned land. Construction began on August 1958, making Candlestick the first modern stadium built entirely of reinforced concrete. However, the ballpark was plagued practically from the beginning with various minor and major issues. From local neighborhoods complaining to a Teamster strike, and most concerning, a grand jury investigation into fraud and funding irregularities, it seemed nothing could go right for Candlestick Park. The Giants had hoped to open in September 1959, but the stadium wasn't ready until the following spring. On April 12, 1960, then Vice President Richard Nixon threw out the ceremonial first pitch on opening day. Luck at least was on the Giants' side for that day as they beat the St. Louis Cardinals in front of a crowd of around 45,000. But the plague of issues wasn't done with Candlestick Park, and yet another issue quickly made itself known, particularly because of the stadium's location. Bay winds whipped through the structure, creating unpredictable conditions for both players and fans alike. In its first season, only 77 home runs were hit. The team quickly moved to try and correct the issue by moving the fences in 1961. During the Giants' tenure, the stadium hosted 2 MLB All-Star games in 1961 and much later in 1984. After the 1970 season, Candlestick was enclosed with outfield grandstands to prepare for the arrival of the San Francisco 49ers. The grandstands did help to reduce the wind speed slightly, but it also had a negative effect of creating swirling gusts inside and practically destroying the iconic view of the bay, which was one of the most unique features of the ballpark. Despite its challenges, Candlestick Park was the stage for 6 Giants postseason runs, including an NLCS appearance in 1971, 1987, and 1989, as well as World Series appearances in 62 and 89. It was home to sports legends like Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, and Barry Bonds, players who changed the game of baseball forever. The Giants played their final game at Candlestick on September 28, 1999, ultimately relocating to Pacific Bell Park, which is now known as Oracle Park. The 49ers continued to use the stadium until 2013, though. Its final event wasn't even sports related. Former Beatles legend Paul McCartney played a concert in August 2014, which is a music icon helping to end the legend of a unique ballpark. Demolition was completed in September 2015. The site is now staged for redevelopment into office space, which is a far cry from the history that was made on the very spot. Let's move over to the Midwest at Sportsman's Park in St. Louis. While most parks housed both a baseball and football team, Sportsman's Park was rare in that it housed 2 major league teams simultaneously from 1920 to 53. Situated at the northwest corner of Grand Boulevard and Dodier Street in North St. Louis, the location played host to organized baseball since the 1860s, making it one of the sport's most storied and hallowed grounds. The modern version of Sportsman Park took shape in 1909 when the St. Louis Browns built a new steel and concrete grandstand. It was only the 3rd of its kind in the majors and 2nd in American League after Shibe Park located in Philadelphia. The Browns repositioned the diamond in the southwest corner of the site, where it remained for the rest of the stadium's life. In 1920, the Cardinals joined the Browns as tenants after leaving the outdated Robinson Field in St. Louis. Browns owner Phil Ball had expanded the stadium's capacity from 18,000 to 30,000 in hopes of being able to host a World Series by 1926. While the Browns never reached that goal, the Cardinals did. They defeated the Yankees 4-3 in a dramatic 7-game series that year. Having two baseball teams in one stadium led to an incredibly unique situation during the 1944 World Series, though, between the Cardinals and Browns. It was the last fall classic played entirely in a single stadium shared by both competing teams. The Cardinals won the series 4-2. Sportsman's Park had its own personality and charm. For example, the Budweiser Eagle flapped its wings atop the left center scoreboard after every Cardinals home run. The Globe Democrat newspaper displayed the previous game's star on the right center wall, alongside league standing. Pavilion seats filled in the power alley in right center, and flagpoles stood in fair territory until the 1950s. Over the years, the Sportsman's Park evolved. A second deck was added from first to third base in 1909, then extended to the foul poles in 1925. Bleachers were added in 1926, however by the early 1950s, supporting two major league teams became a significant financial strain on the city and its baseball faithful. Browns owner Bill Veeck tried to outmaneuver the Cardinals with promotional flair, but when Anheuser-Busch purchased the Cardinals in 1953, Veeck knew he just couldn't compete. On April 9, 1953, Veeck sold Sportsman's Park to the Cardinals for $800,000 or nearly $9.5 million in modern money. Beverage giant Anheuser-Busch quickly renovated the aging stadium, which had fallen into such a horrible disrepair, the city had threatened to even condemn the entire venue. The Browns moved to Baltimore after the 1953 season and were renamed the Orioles. The Cardinals would rename the ballpark Busch Stadium, of course, but many longtime fans still called it Sportsman's Park. The end of an era came on May 8, 1966, when the Cardinals played their last game before moving to the new Busch Memorial Stadium downtown. Today, the site lives on as the Herbert Hoover Boys Club, where a baseball diamond quietly marks the spot where legends once played. So let's move over to Busch Memorial Stadium. St. Louis is no stranger to an iconic ballpark and securing its spot in baseball history. Busch Memorial Stadium stood as a symbol of St. Louis's sporting ambition. It was a downtown landmark that served as home to the Cardinals from 1966 to 2005. It also briefly hosted the NFL Cardinals and St. Louis Rams. Originally known as Civic Center Busch Memorial Stadium, it joined the collective of other multi-purpose cookie-cutter stadiums built between the 1960s and 70s. During the years, the Cardinals played at the aging Sportsman's Park. Plans for a new stadium had circulated as there was a desperate need for a modern replacement. In the early 1960s, beer giant Anheuser-Busch, which already had a long history with the Cardinals, pledged $5 million toward the $20 million project, and ground was broken on May 24, 1964, and the stadium rose on 30 acres in the heart of downtown. Nearly 2 years later, the Cardinals will play their first game there on May 12, 1966. Fans filled 4 tiers of 46,068 red seats encircling a pristine grass field. Behind the outfield fence stood a $1.5 million scoreboard featuring an electronic cardinal that chirped after home runs. Designed by American-based engineering companies Sverdrup and Parcel and built by German-based company Grun and Bilfinger, the stadium's most distinctive feature was its roof. A 96-arch crown of arches created by architect Edward Durrell Stone. It was inspired by the famous Gateway Arch, which had only been completed a year earlier. It gave the stadium a visual identity that set it apart from its peers in Atlanta, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. In 1970, AstroTurf replaced the natural grass to allow easier conversion between football and baseball. 2 sets of 8,000 movable seats could be repositioned to form the football gridiron. After the NFL Cardinals moved to Phoenix in 1987, Busch became a baseball-only venue. That was until the Rams arrived in 1995. They played part of their inaugural season at Busch before eventually moving to Edward Jones Dome, which opened on November 12, 1995. The final football game at the stadium was played on October 22, 1995 against the San Francisco 49ers. With football gone, the stadium was retrofitted for baseball. Natural grass returned, new seats and scoreboards were installed, bullpens were relocated behind the outfield fence, and the area beyond the outfield was enhanced. The renovations were a short-lived quality of life improvement until the Cardinals played their final game at Busch Memorial Stadium on October 19, 2005, the night of Game 6 of the National League Championship Series. Demolition began later that year and the stadium was brought down by a wrecking ball. Its successor, Busch Stadium III, opened April 4, 2006 and rose just south of its predecessor, occupying part of the original footprint, a quiet echo of what once stood. From the windswept edges of Candlestick Point to the echoing arches of Busch Memorial, these stadiums were more than concrete and steel. They were each chapters in the living story of baseball. They held the weight of triumph and heartbreak. Some were part of baseball legends and others barely survived controversy, and though many have been demolished and are long gone, their memory endures in the cheers they once held, the players they cradled, and their communities that they helped shape. This collection is not just a record of ballparks, it's a tribute to the architectural marvels and masterpieces where baseball was more than just a game.